0, 1, 0, 0, 1.
So others will.
That's the first time on the agenda.
Sometimes you have to say, start the meeting. Let the meeting begin.
Let me borrow my gavel.
Wow. Okay. I won't take it personally.
Insert my phone is off.
So I think we have a quorum. And so at the table are.
Good morning. This is Test for Review. I'm with the DC Sustainable Energy Utility.
Mark Battle, Pepco.
So
Ladislav, DOE.
Teresa Lawrence, DOE.
Hussein Karim, DOE.
Sandra Madison Fry, the People's Council.
great, thank you. I think we got everybody on the phone and folks in the room want to identify themselves.
Adrian Reton Henderson, DC OPC.
I'm Golden Nali, DCSU. Denver, DCSU.
Patty Boyd, DCSU.
Crystal McDonald.
Mayor.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we did the first, and now the approval of the agenda. Is it something different on the screen than it is in our?
Yes, it's the same as, that's in, what is it, the folder plus the additional item on leveraging. Everything else is the same.
Okay, and when is leveraging on your agenda, on the agenda on the wall?
After the Mod 7 update.
Okay. Thank you. Does the agenda look okay to folks? Want to
Yes.
approve the agenda? Okay.
I move that we approve it.
Thank you. Do I have
Second.
a second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Okay. How about the minutes, the February 12th, 2019 minutes? Anybody have any comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On, in FY19 on page 2, it says $485,000 was spent with CDEs was what?
Probably a typo. You said on page 2?
Yes.
Probably
We were
the
talking
last
about
was-
Yes.
should be the
That shouldn't typo, it should be stricken.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm looking to see the note I sent you before, Dr. L, with my suggested description of the agenda item and how to figure the actions for the next agenda. Should that be captured in here?
Yes, we put it in the note that went out to the board and referred to page 4 of the minutes because it was referring to this conversation that Jared Lang led, which said that before the multi-year contract, the requirements were different and they got a higher level of incentive. And then after the new multi-year contract, the level of incentive went down because of the savings or yield requirements. So we asked the board members to refer that item to this conversation about low-income programs. So as a result, the agenda item is to try to present solutions to overcome that issue with innovation and other suggestions to overcome this issue.
Because
Okay,
the savings went down?
No,
Because there's
less money was able to go out to low-income or multifamily units compared to before.
So-
the savings would go down.
I thought when
Right.
you and I conversed, I'm sorry.
No, I was sidebar, excuse me.
No, please do. That's why you're here.
No, I was just clarifying that it also impacted savings.
Okay, and so I thought that when we corresponded, and I can't find my email, what we were talking about was phrasing this, where I think the issue that we talked about was whether the benchmark, which we've changed with regard to low-income savings and spend, is accomplishing its intended goals. And then what we were hearing from Jared, we think, was that it might not be, because it's stifling innovation and resulting in overall less spending and less innovation and potentially less overall savings. So
Okay.
I still don't think this has captured it. I thought that when you would email back, you said, oh yeah, well that's what we'll put into the email.
Right, we didn't amend the minutes because it didn't come through that we wanted to change the benchmark, which is
Right, but that's the action item, and that was his topic of discussion in the last time. And so,
right.
what we were going to try to do, but I think we all
I see.
didn't
Okay.
get it together soon enough, was figure out how to advance that discussion. And you said, would you like to hear the SEU talk about it?
Yeah,
of course. And,
right.
You know, so, but I don't. Okay.
But we can, add a sentence that captures that in the minutes itself. I think I missed amending the minutes with that sentiment. If we put it in the email to, sort of qualify the agenda item, which is on page 4, where it says Chair Kwame said to put on the next agenda, which came after the discussion with Mr. Lang. But we can add a sentence, to qualify it to say this goes to whether the benchmark should be amended to figure out solutions on innovation, savings, and funding.
I thought you said the conversation was, does the benchmark achieve its goal?
Just a change in the benchmark, yeah.
And then, what to do. And I assume that it would be changing the benchmark or adding, exploring whether innovations, et cetera, could impact the benchmark itself so that it would achieve its goal. But I don't know, I was not here. I mean, does that capture it, or are we talking a more refined?
So the first sentence in here discussing Jared's presentation was that he gave a presentation showing his experience with UCSU since the low-income benchmark was changed. So I think the central question still is, has the change in the benchmark, how has the change in the benchmark affected low-income spend and savings?
Okay.
And should it be evaluated again?
Sure. Could we add that and then send it back around for the board? Or we'll add that sentiment in the minutes.
I'd say let's add that sentence, but I think more importantly, let's talk about it.
Okay.
So last time I had suggested that the minutes come out earlier, we decide earlier on how to make the conversation really robust this time. I'm not sure that we're necessarily prepared for that, or you all are, but I don't know if everybody else is, because I don't know that we had time, but we'll want to hear from you guys, and then maybe we'll still continue the discussion. Yeah, I think that'll just help to steer it.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else on the minutes? Anyone on the phone? Are you all still looking?
Vicki, this is Nina Dodge speaking.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, did you just conclude of what the next step would be? I mean, have we registered what the next step will be?
No, thank you. That's good. I think, why don't we see how we fare at the end of the SEU's presentation and decide if we should still be taking it up further for additional discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, Nina.
Okay. You're welcome.
Anyone else on any comments on the minutes? Okay. Anybody want to move for approving the minutes with the change that we just made?
I have just a point of clarification. Well, I guess maybe this goes to the contract modification, but I was questioning what is the relationship now between the SCU and the SFA? Did DOEE still have some portion of organizing, managing their SCU, their SFA program, and the SCU has responsibilities for managing its portion of the SFA?
That's correct, Madam People's Council, as of, first Tuesday in November, when the council approved
The legislation?
additional funding that allowed us to start a Solar for All program to run for fiscal years 19, 20, and 21. Funded that at $12 million this year, $10 million and $10 million in the 2 out years. So there is a Solar for All program that was launched by DOEE in FY17 that is ongoing. We don't have any direct relationship with that, just to make sure that the clarification is made here. DOEE is administering that program. It has a set of grantees that are working on projects. Some are probably closed. And then we have a Solar for All program. I think we did a briefing on that either at the last advisory board meeting or the one before. I think it would be good for us to come back to the board maybe in, not next month, the following month, to update you, because there's been a lot of change and movement in terms of what we will be offering this year.
Okay.
Both for single-family homes and for
the governmental homes. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I move that we accept the minutes from last month.
Thank you. With the modification that I requested, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes are approved with the modification. Thank you. Okay, so I was wanting to get onto the agenda whether we ought to elect a vice chair to run meetings and speak on behalf of the board if necessary, and if I'm absent or the chair is absent, and wanted to see if people thought that we ought to do that. I'm going to throw it out there.
Yes, I guess. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Have we had a vice chair?
We have.
I mean, not previously, but last year, did we have a functioning?
We had Larry Martin as vice chair in the past.
But that was many years ago.
That was.
Okay. No, I think.
But since then, wasn't there?
I don't think so.
Wasn't Vicky the vice chair too?
I thought I was.
Randy?
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah,
as vice chair.
Vicky was.
Okay.
I forgot. Right, because Randy hadn't been able to fulfill his tenure, so I guess I was vice chair for a while and then, okay. So, so, shall we?
Yes.
Do we have any nominations for a vice chair?
I'm laughing only because I think that's why no one showed up. While we're over the top.
They can be nominated too.
I know.
Do we have any volunteers for the vice chair position? Like Millie?
Yes, I would like to volunteer.
That would be great. Do we have any competition? Do we need a primary? On which network? Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, so would somebody like to move for Millie to be vice chair?
So moved.
Thank you. Anybody like it?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Besides Millie, who is not on. Okay, done. Great. Thank you. We have a vice chair. Thank you, Millie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yes. Now, on to comments on modification 7. Presented at the last board meeting. So what am I seeing here? I'm seeing 5 of them. But they're... I'm gonna stand up. Was this the 7th modification in 5 parts? Okay. So, since there were 5 parts, I don't know if people had a chance to take a look at, I don't even remember at this point why it is that we thought that further discussion was warranted, but it was an issue that I thought wanted people's attention, but I, for the life of me, can't remember what it was. That's why we need a young vice chair. I'm not sure we captured it. Oh, it was clarification regarding implementation of the Solar for All program and emergency HVAC program. Did we just cover that?
Was that the question? I mean, it answered my question. I don't know. I didn't see anything per se that addressed this specifically in these modifications.
Those 2 programs were detailed in Mod 4 and 5. Now we're executing. Sorry, Mod 5 and Mod 6. They're already in the contract where we provided what the SU is expected to do on those programs.
And you submitted that to the board?
Yes, the board reviewed that before we even executed the modification.
I'll look for my files. So this modification, as I read it, the major change is that it is accepting the green jobs from not being included. I know that's a negative, but not being included or evaluated in terms of you reaching your benchmark. So in other words, the green jobs created, I'm assuming by the SFA, will be used in evaluating whether or not you met the benchmark. I'm assuming it's the lower.
I would say it's the opposite of that almost.
Okay.
Madam People's Counsel, I would say that what we're trying to clarify here is that, let's say there were existing staff working under the SETF funding. Mm-hmm. Take myself, for instance. I just pick on myself for a minute. Under the mod that was approved in November, with adding the Solar for All money, many of us now on the staff are working both under the SETF, where we are charging our hours, and we might be working on a few hours under the SFA money. This is REDF money,
right?
Renewable Energy Development Fund money. And so as to not to denigrate the amount of time that I am actually being able to count towards a green job, even though some of my time, maybe 2%, 3%, is charged to the REDF funding, the Solar for All funding, I would still count it as a full green job, rather than 95 or 97% of one. Now, there are staff who have been hired to exclusively work on the Solar for All project. They would not be counted towards green jobs.
Okay. So it's a carve-out, essentially.
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what it is, so that we're not penalizing the DCSU full-time staff because you're splitting responsibilities.
Does that sound okay to folks?
Well, no, you would not have had a problem before because it didn't exist. So this is addressing the change.
Yes, this wouldn't have existed prior to adding Solar for All to the country.
Correct. This is just something that has arisen as a result of adding the substantial funding.
I think I'm still a little mystified by the math, as per usual. So if you're spending, hypothetically, 15% of your time on Solar for All and 85% on DCSU matters, does that mean that the total amount of green jobs hours spent on DCSU matters has been reduced because 15% of your time is...
No, it's the same as before.
It would be the same under this modification.
The 15% would count towards the SEU's green job benchmark.
The 15% of his time on Solar for All.
Yes, because he works on both.
So without this modification, we could lose green jobs hours from folks like myself or Marcus or Ben or somebody who might split, clearly not half the time, but a quantifiable amount of time working on the solar for all activities.
And does the solar for all have a separate green jobs requirement?
No, it has no requirements, and the people who bill 100% of solar for all don't get counted as get set to the green jobs benchmark.
So just out of curiosity, why don't they have it?
It's a capacity benchmark. We have to achieve a certain solar capacity, get a certain level of funding.
But just under the law, isn't there
No, not under the solar for all law. There is no requirement to go.
a green jobs? Sorry, I'm thinking.
There is a CBE requirement.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I got confused.
This is Nina on the phone here. Might it be helpful to track the amount of time on solar for all for an initial year to see what those hours add up to roughly, and then take a look at this again? I mean, I'm not suggesting. I think, I'm not suggesting that we not pass this, but might it be good just so we know where we are to find out what the total is of hours that are going to solar for all in the first year?
Right, Ms. Dodge, we're doing that currently, and whenever the advisory board would want to report on those numbers, we can provide one.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Maybe we could add it to our quarterly financial report or quarterly reporting. As a matter of course.
That's fine with us. That's fine.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think that's a helpful idea. Anybody have anything further on the contract modification? So the board's okay with it. Do we vote on it?
No.
We're just applying comments. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, next, and let the record reflect, we have Farah St. Surin here. Is it?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Want to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you are, and what position.
Farah St. Surin, I'm representing the low income group. Currently a consultant at Deloitte and have worked with low income communities in a volunteer capacity here in DC, and then I worked in low income in Boston, which is where I'm from.
As am I.
Great place. Great place. We're not biased.
Where do we have access? Welcome. Thanks for joining.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. So your presence is timely, given the discussion that we're going to have after our leveraging update. So you want to go ahead with that?
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We have a few slides, and I will only run through the fourth one, really, which I think is typically when we present to the board, we would tell you where we are just in terms of our annual benchmarks. Lance, if you wouldn't mind forwarding one more slide, maybe two, to kind of just show that this is actually the correct slide. Good morning, Director Wells.
Morning, sir.
And these are numbers through the end of February?
January.
January, okay. So, where the graph that we're showing here represents where we are in relation to the maximum benchmarks, 5-year cumulative maximum benchmarks for electricity, natural gas, and renewable energy capacity. As we stand here today in the middle of March, at the end of this month, we will be exactly at the midway point in this 5-year contract. The numbers you're seeing today represent a point in time that's a little bit in advance of clearly the end of the middle of the contract. but as of the end of January. But what I'm trying to say in ways is that we are about at the midway point, and as you can see in the electric savings, the gas savings, we're about at the 50% level of maximum attainment with those respective benchmarks. So essentially we're on target. We're just about right where we should be at this time of year, in this time of the contract, the tenure of the contract. On the renewable side, as you can see, we are well ahead of probably where we should be midway through the contract. We've made significant progress there. I'm very proud of the work that we've done in that space. So these are, like I said, I just didn't want to spend a lot of time here, but I hope, can the people on the phone see the slide?
It was sent out to them, so you can
Okay,
just
so
let them
we're
know
on
we're on
slide
slide
4 right now, which has 3 bars on it, red and blue bars, that are actually showing you where we were as of the end of January, 4 months into the 3rd year of the contract.
Okay. What do you attribute the major increase in renewable capacity?
In the earlier days of doing the work in the renewable space, we concentrated on single-family low-income homes, doing as many as 155 or so a year. The total output from 155 homes, is significantly less than you can get in some of the commercial work that we've been doing in this space now. And so it's basically a shift of programming from single-family homes to more commercial work. Now, as we get into the Solar for All update, when we do that, either the next board meeting or the one after that, you'll see where we're going back again to do work both in single-family homes and in some commercial spaces. Those numbers will not be additive to this number, though, so we still have work to do under the SETF funding to achieve the maximum goal here. But we've been going about it in a different market segment. Is the short one. Right. But the real reason that we're here this morning, I won't take up too much time here because we'll have a larger discussion later on, is to talk about where we are with our leveraging benchmark. As you know, in our old contract, there was not a leveraging benchmark. In the new contract, this is one of the changes from the first contract to the second one. We have a leveraging benchmark of $5 million over 5 years. Again, it's a cumulative benchmark. And Anmal and Mali, who've been working with us now for a little over 5 years.
Finished 5 minutes ago.
Okay, all right.
Feels longer.
Feels longer. Has been spearheading these efforts for us, and I'm going to allow him to come up here and talk about what we've been doing in this space, where we've been able to achieve some success, and what the future looks like for making sure that we show a fully completed 100% attained chart by the end of the 5-year mark.
Thank you, Ted. Good morning, everyone. Before I get into the details of what my team does, along with the rest of the DCSU colleagues of ours in leveraging, let me sort of set the backdrop about how we go about engaging and why we engage in leveraging activities. First of all, are the contract requirements, of course, that Ted alluded to. And this is just a summary of the various sections in the contract under which the details for leveraging are laid out. So this is a simple summary of that. So the basic contract requirement is to leverage $5 million in external funds to be utilized in conjunction with the SETF to supplement DCSU programs. Now, of course, there's a lot of nuances built into each of these words, and that become apparent as I go about describing how we leverage. The certain sources that have been identified in the contract, like federal grants, private funders, the PJM capacity market, renewable energy certificates. And again, as I'll demonstrate, we've actually managed to hit all of these 4 different categories in varying degrees of success in terms of leveraging. Right. Some other notable aspects, again, contained in the contract are that the leveraging benchmark can only be met through non-district government sources. So the Solar for All funding per se does not count towards our leveraging benchmark because it comes from the REDF, which is a district government source. The other thing worth noting is that the leveling benchmark is only measured at the end of the 5th year. So it's a cumulative benchmark, which is not subject to annual benchmarks. The 5 million is the we can take it hard to say.
Dictated by this card.
Let the record reflect, we have the chair, Willie Phillips, has come to join.
Well, not exactly. I may look similar to Willie. But no, I'm carrying his Ryan Policy Advisor, Chairman Phillips.
Okay, thank you. Clearly, I've never met Chairman Phillips.
I know. Brothers from different mothers.
Yes, so the leveraging benchmark we referred to earlier is the maximum. The minimum benchmark is half that, it's 2.5 million. Of course, that's not what our guiding post is. But it's below that level that we have to pay a penalty. It's above that level that we earn performance bonus. Finally, unlike some of the other benchmarks in the DCSU contract, the leveraging benchmark and the activities are not being conducted against or performed against set industry standards like efficiency programs, etc. So what we did as a starting point was to draft a memo that goes about level setting, how to operationalize leveraging. How do we conduct those activities? What is the evidentiary standard and the reporting required to ensure that we're all on the same page about how the benchmark actually translates into reality? And that's the memo against which we conduct our activities and report to DOEE about how to score against the benchmark.
Have we seen that? The board, the memo.
No, we haven't sent that, but.
I was just gonna ask what some of the highlights are.
That would be
what
good.
are the
Yeah,
guidelines
that would
for
be
the
fun.
rate of return? And
Well, yes. So actually, yes.
This is some of the
This is
information
the
that's in
highlight.
there.
That's in the memo.
So what the memo does is that it breaks down the activities into these categories: funding, partnerships, sponsorships, TGM, and renewable energy certificates. And it goes about setting different standards of evidence required and documentation and reporting for each. And it even defines what these mean. The funding, for instance, are monetary resources that come to VEIC as the initial fiscal agent from a third-party funder, a non-district government source, which is then spent in support of DCSU's programs without the intent of recouping the resources or returning or earning a return on investment. So this is money to be spent, not to earn a return on investment. So that's the sort of detail that we mentioned. Similarly, partnerships are monetary and non-monetary resources in conjunction with GCSU programs and support of mission. Coming from a partner, where here the evidentiary standard is a document like an MOU with a partner that shows under what conditions you will fund. Sponsorships are financial or other resources received by DCSU, and each sponsor will have its own guidance saying what they want from it, maybe brand recognition. Maybe it's an open monologue, what have you. So it's a different category of leveraging activity. And PGM and renewable energy certificates, these have been called out in the contract, and we categorize them separately because we believe these activities are being conducted on behalf of the ratepayers specifically, and so the funds flow for PGM and SREX will be different compared to the funds flow for the funding partnerships.
What do you mean by that?
Next slide.
I think I would like a copy of the memo, just so I can process it.
So this is what we mean by how it should be different. So scenario A refers to the first two categories where the funds count. Well, sorry. Scenario A refers to the last two categories, PGM and SREC, where these activities count towards the leveraging benchmark and the funds flow to the SETF. So the source of funds, which is PGM or SREC, first comes to VEIC, is then put back into the SETF and then added back onto the purchase order for DCSU for our program.
Madam People's Councilor, are you clear with how that flow works?
I'd quite like to see the memo, so I can have some time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it would be helpful to understand if we're looking for something like hitting every category, or like how do you see if there's progress? Because there's nothing, there isn't anything numeric specified, so.
Oh,
there...
we'll have slides
okay.
about the numbers behind each of these activities.
Excuse me, Nina, again on the phone. It would be helpful for me anyway on the phone, when you switch slides, if you could just say so. And I'm assuming we're still on the leveraging activities, slide number 8, is that right?
We are on the slide titled Visualizing Leveraging.
Visualizing the leveraging. Okay, I missed that.
Yes, and I'm sure we got it up.
If we can't always hear you 100%.
Just to clarify why on scenario A the funds flow through the district, it's stated in the contract these funds are derived from assets that are owned by the district. The energy efficiency capacity savings that the SEU bids into PGM are district savings, and so are the SRECs deriving from any renewable energy installation or any sponsorship of or ownership of renewable energy credits that the SEU will take ownership of. Hence, the checks come into the district, and then we add it to the contract for them to be able to perform their services. So think of it this way. Even if VIC were to contract it next year or the following year, these funds will still be available for whoever's managing the SEU to implement the programs and to continue operations.
So these funds go back to programs.
Yes.
Operational programs.
Yes.
On a point of clarification, all leverage funds under either scenario will have to be used in conjunction with our programs account with leverage. But these flow differently.
Okay. So now scenario B.
Scenario B is in which, again, third-party source of funds where the EIC is the fiscal agent, and we spend it directly in support of the programs conducted by the SEU. But it has a different evidentiary standard because now we have to produce information and documents regarding the receipt of funds in a separate bank account that VIC maintains for TCSU leveraging activities, and also provides documentary evidence that they've been spent in conjunction with TCSU.
And the reason that you have to do that is because they don't flow through the SETF, where you already have counting.
Exactly. And can you give them 2 examples of funds that received through scenario B?
Sure. One would be the federal grant that we received from DOE, the Federal Department of Energy, in partnership with INT, and which had a cost sharing. So in which we first we conducted the work, raised the invoice to DOE, and DOE paid us. And all of that paperwork was then shared with DOE about the expense that we incurred and the funds that we received from DOE.
So the funds went towards the cost share?
The funds, the external fund went towards the expenses that the DCSU incurred on that program.
Give a second.
Oh, right. Second example would be one which, we are proud to say we got a grant from the Marriott Foundation in support of our workforce development program. And so the process is the same. We applied for a grant to Marriott Foundation, they approved it, and we'll be conducting workforce development activities specifically paid for by Marriott. But these activities are part of the DCSU workforce development program. And as and when we spend that money and we receive it, that's the sort of documents we submit to DOE for consideration and scoring of the grant as leverage.
So the funds are applied, in that instance, the funds are applied to projects connected to Marriott?
No. Those are
That they used, okay.
Yeah. the general
It's an
DCSU.
independent grant.
Yes.
Is there a way that the government, DC government, could sweep those particular funds
No.
into the overall budget, the
No,
operating budget?
these are funds directly to VIC that's operating the DCSU.
And so I think I missed something. Sorry, this is Nina again. So VEIC holds, are these funds held in escrow? I missed that part of the mechanics.
It is not an escrow per se, but it's a designated bank account that VIC is operating for leveraging purposes.
Right. And you were saying before that should another contractor come on board, those funds that dedicated account would transfer to the new contractor.
Not in this scenario. That was in a previous scenario for the PGM funds and for SREC funds.
Oh, okay.
When we're talking
okay.
federal or private grants, they are direct relationship with an entity. So if VIC were no longer operating the SCU, then they will pretty much have to terminate that grant with the feds, and they'll work out how they close out that grant process. Well, we're not involved in those transactional relationships between VIC and a private entity or
and the
VIC
fund,
and the
okay.
federal government.
But that does count towards the leveraging benchmark.
Yes, because they're all external funds, non-district government funds that are used to expand the CSU operations.
And we'll hear in a couple of slides of the performance and what's been raised so far.
Yes, ma'am. Moving on to the next slide, titled the leveraging theme. It's three of us, myself, as the Director of Financing Strategies, Patricia Proctor, who's the Development Manager, who does a lot of fundraising, reporting, and internal coordination with the different teams, and Marcus Allen, who works on sponsorships and partnerships. Moving on to the next slide, titled Leveraging Performance. As you can see, we've broken it out into 4 categories: PGM, SREC support program, funding, and sponsorships and partnerships. It was a slow start. I think, as I've mentioned previously, a lot of what we are doing here is being imagined as we go along, because these aren't really industry standard programs that we're running. So the first one that we figured out was the PGM, and that has continued to scale up. It is in this fiscal year that we figured out how to leverage SRECs in support of the DCSU. As I mentioned, for funding, we received in FY17 and FY18 federal support. And in terms of sponsorships, we received sponsorship from PEPCO in FY18 for an event. So during FY19, we continue to scale up our PGM efforts. We have launched the SREC support program, and in brackets, in parentheses, the Solar for All indicates the FY17 Solar for All program managed by DOE, where we are working with one of the grantees to help them leverage their SRECs. In funding, we have 5,000 from Merit Foundation that I alluded to, and we have many more proposals that have gone out requesting funding for a variety of DCSU activities like workforce development, as well as requests for sponsorship. And the projections we have for FY20 and 21 are based on estimates, but they do have some grounding on the leads that we have. As you can see, the 5-year total is around 3.7 million, which at the moment is short of the 5 million benchmark. But we really hope, as some of these concepts come to reality, we can scale them up in the forthcoming years.
I have 2 questions. Yes, one, how would you explain the volatility in the cumulative total at first? And then tell me something about the impediments that, briefly, the impediments that occurred in FY18 and FY17, and how you overcome them. What have you done differently to probably start with the second.
Sure. So we knew right off the bat that we had to do something with PJM because it is something that was on the table even before the new contract was placed. So that is something we had already figured out how to do. So between FY17 and FY18, the difference that you see is our ability to actually increase the number of projects we can bid because we got smarter at it. And we also got a new contractor and we got better revenue sharing terms. So that explains some of the volatility over there. And frankly, not so much an impediment, but it took us a while to figure out what our leveraging strategy is, what the categories are, what the expectations from DOE would be if we were to engage in these activities. So the memo that I referred to actually took a long time in generating it internally and then socializing with DOE and then actually conducting activities. So it was tough for us to launch a whole bunch of activities without knowing under what roadmap we are following for those actually to bring them to fruition. So that explains the ramp-up period for us.
Why do you think that the PJM income will go down?
So and that's because we haven't figured out what to do, because each project that we bid into in one fiscal year, we receive the revenue over 4 fiscal years. So we aren't sure what will happen to some of the, so that's one. Second is there was some internal discussion about what happens if the lighting code changes. A lot of projects will hence perhaps not qualify as energy efficient reductions above baseline. So that was the other thing. So there is a certain fall off that will happen from previous projects, and we aren't sure how much we'll be able to get the team motivated to bid projects if we are not around after 21 to actually get the revenue.
Do you think that the passage of the legislation will increase the opportunities for leveraging more funds for PJM?
As long as it leads to more energy efficiency retrofits above code, it should.
This is Bernice McIntyre. I just wanted to know how are you dealing with the fact that you're under contract program. So it creates a problem here, and I'm assuming the contract deals after. How do you deal with funds that might come in after, let's say, the ECIC is selected as a contract? That built into the contract?
It is, in a way, the first arrangement that was set up with PGM through their third-party bidder called out that the funds will flow to the district. The VIC was no longer in place because, again, these are contractual payments based on district-owned assets. So VIC wasn't there to divert to the district or to the new contractor that the district would make.
What about those contracts that are like the area or funds that are not tied, that are third-party funds?
Yeah, those I believe are all relationships with VIC that will end when VIC is no longer in place, because it's not set up to simply move those relationships to a different contractor.
Yes, so it is an impediment. When we go about talking to funders, etc., the question does come up: what happens at the end of September 2021? So far, we haven't really put out proposals for programs that last beyond that, but as we get closer into 20, that will become an issue, and which is why you'll see a drop off in all that I've estimated in 20.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that with the old contract there was an extension given.
Yeah.
So that
with the old contract, we usually provide the intent to exercise an option around the 1st of July, which is basically 3 months before the end of the fiscal year. I think with this process here, we'll be able to do that much sooner because there's a 5-year contract and we'll be making determinations pretty much at the start of the last year of the contract as to whether we should renew or not.
So just back to the PJM one, if an issue is that there needs to be incremental improvement in performance or energy efficiency, the energy efficiency standards get more stringent, then there's less flexibility on the energy efficiency side. Isn't what we want to incentivize looking for additional ways to participate in PJM so that the absolute number doesn't decline, but it may move into different areas for potential investment or aggregation or activity?
Yeah, that would certainly be our intent. What we don't know at a certain point, how much you earn per kW of capacity bid has to be measured with the amount of effort that goes into measuring that kW. So there is a certain part of our portfolio that we still don't bid, and it is those multi-measure retrofits. We need metering. And if we are able to figure out a cost-effective way, and as some of the low-hanging fruit disappears, we imagine that our larger energy savings will come from more multi-measure projects. And we need to figure out a better way to actually bid those together into the PJM. So far, we've not had to do that, but I think we're still trying to figure out how to expand our portfolio that can fit into PJM. But I haven't put a number to it yet.
So earlier on, I'm sorry, go ahead. Someone sounded like they were trying to speak on the phone, but they got cut out by static. So we can't hear you.
Okay, it's Nina again, and is SCU researching the ancillary payments that, or the possibility of payments from PJM for ancillary services into the grid, for instance, voltage stabilization using batteries, or is that something that it might be premature to apply for that kind of contract at this stage, but is there preliminary work being done on that? Do you know, or is that something you'll be looking at in the next 2 years, sorry.
We've certainly done our research at that end. But like you said, it's, those markets are less mature than the forward capacity market for energy efficiency. And the other issue, at least in terms of ease of access to those projects, is that we get access to capacity rights because it is embedded in our incentive agreement that anyone taking incentive from us hands over these rights to us. Now, until we have an incentive program that does the same for storage, how do we take ownership of any such interactions with the PJM at the grid level? And we don't have a program yet related to storage.
Thank you.
So I guess that gets back to my initial question, which was that the guidelines talk about categories for investment. And it's
categories of leveraging.
Leveraging, excuse me. But there's not a measurement against which to say, are we doing what we could in each of those categories?
Right, so the benchmark is at an overall level. We have devised these categories as a sort of system to guide our activities, but we don't have a benchmark for each category per se.
But the overall benchmark isn't also numeric, is it?
It is $5 million.
Okay.
Yes, so the 3.7 million that you see.
The contract or
That was on slide 1 or 2 that you presented. But the overall contract says $5 million over 5 years.
Okay.
It doesn't say what that has to come to PJM and a quarter has to come to the rest of the fund.
Okay.
That wasn't thought about in the contemplated.
No, I'm just asking. Okay.
Yeah, and Vicki, I have a question, but I want to defer to others because I've asked a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm still learning about how the RECs work in terms of going to SCU. My understanding is that I had thought that the RECs were going to the third-party solar financing service providers who are doing installation. I guess I'm wrong since DC government owns them, those RECs. So I just want to make sure I clarify my understanding about those. Is that right?
Alma will explain how the DCSU came to own the SRECs.
My understanding is that prior to Solar for all the installations were essentially owned by the third-party energy services companies, along with all the RECs. So yes, if you could just clarify that for what's happening now in Solar for All.
Sure. And yes, the way you describe one way of monetizing the SRECs is for the owner of the system to hold on to them and use them in the financing, either on the spot market or through a long-term off-take contract. That's certainly a predominant way of how at least single-family homes are financing the solar systems. We took a different route, and I want to draw the analogy to efficiency incentive payments. When we give an incentive for a boiler retrofit, we pay that incentive upon installation, and then we take the ownership of the efficiency of the capacity reduction, and then we bid them into the PGM, monetize them, and put them back into the SEU. In a similar vein, what we have done for low-income single-family solar is that we give an upfront incentive payment, which is paid to either the homeowner or, in our case, it goes to the third-party program manager, and in return, we take ownership of 5 years worth of SRECs produced by that system. We monetize that in the market, and we put all the proceeds back into the SEU.
Okay. So DOEE takes ownership over 5 years of the SRECs on the contract with on the PPA.
The distinction is that the owners are BIC / the DCSU as the administrator, as it is with the PJM, where we are the contracting party interacting with the market, but the proceeds get handed over to DOEE to put back into the DCSU programs.
And we're still talking about the solar RECs, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's just to bring the retail energy. That the documentation you give to DOE is to verify that you got these estimate goals at this price.
Yeah, we look at the documentation, but more importantly, what comes for us is the actual check. We need to see those zeros on the check to be able to count. Yeah, we do look at both this entire program that Anmol is describing. It took us a couple of weeks to even get through, the design and common understanding of how this will work in the marketplace, because these are SETF dollars that are being used to leverage the SRECs. They are not Solar for All REDF dollars.
And just back to the technical aspect, after the first 5 years of the solar install, I guess, then the SRECs revert to the third party?
In this case, it reverts to the homeowner.
To the homeowner. Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh, so they get equity.
Yes.
Okay. And they, so they own the system after five, or they own the production and they own as well as the system after 5 years.
Yes, since this is in support of the 2017 Solar for All grantee, which is Solar United Neighborhoods, the homeowners actually own the systems and the production from day one. It's just that we take ownership of the first 5 years of SRECs in order to provide them a high enough upfront incentive so that they don't have to go out of pocket at all.
Okay. Oh, this is certainly music to my ears. That's great. I had thought that it was Okay, good. This is very great. And I'm still not quite clear on how the SRECs redound to, I see how they redound to SEU, but in terms of the Solar for All is counting towards fulfillment of the renewable benchmark?
No.
No, I didn't think so. So could you clarify, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get how the SRECs redound to the SEU, I mean, you know, the benchmark contract versus the performance contract versus the Solar for All program. And I know you explained that, but I didn't quite catch it.
So in this particular case, this was a 2017 Solar for All grant managed by DOEE. Sun received an initial amount to install these systems over about 180, about 200 low-income households. Now, forget the DCSU's participation on the SREC side. Normally, Sun would have taken this grant from DOEE, found an upfront buyer from the open market, and basically provided the system for free for the low-income household. However, because of volatility in the market, they couldn't find a buyer that would give them the right price. So that's when the SU stepped in using funds from the SETF to supplement this effort. So the contribution to our participation in this particular program was limited to the funds from the SETF, not the RETF. Hence, all the SREC proceeds get credited to the SETF.
Right, so it's tied to this particular, the terms of the DC Sun grant. I mean, this is designed to accomplish just, right, and to increase the equity on low-income ownership of the owners of houses. So they increase their equity on their home through this program because of ownership, and you folks helped in the financing of this program, therefore share in the sort of program returns.
Yes, ma'am. However, the good thing about this, and unless someone wants to stick with the numbers, we can move to the next slide. The good thing about this is that now that we have the structure in place, we can actually scale this up to make sure that we provide such sort of support, especially to the low-income household, so that we are maximizing the SRECs on their behalf.
Right. And how long is the DC Sun grant for?
I think it ends September of this fiscal year.
Yes.
And so that will count
and
towards,
then,
I'm sorry, towards the low income benchmark?
Our spend in this case, yes.
And then the further income from the SREC support program, that's the tail end of the 5-year agreement to own the first 5 years of SREC.
Somewhat.
So it's very grant specific.
It is somewhat related to that, but not exactly. We hope that we can conduct some of these activities over the coming years with other grantees or as an open product.
And does the Solar for All program, the terms of the program, the legislation allow you to actually request this kind of proposal, a proposal that would do this?
I'm not sure about the existing Solar for All program, but under the current Solar for All programs, if a single family, a grantee under the single family space wanted DCSU support to replicate what we did for Sun, I don't think anything precludes us from doing that.
No, there's nothing that precludes the SU from doing that.
Okay. I think that's something that, it'll be of interest to I don't know when the next round of Solar for All grants goes out, et cetera, but it'll be interesting to know whether there are any other grants designed along these lines in the next round. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So moving on to the final slide called future leveraging activities. We hope to scale up our current SREC leveraging efforts, PGM, grant funding, online donations, and sponsorships. And we hope to launch a few new initiatives like crowdfunding, revenue share with implementation partners, and partnerships for equipment donations. We have an existing partnership with the U.S. Green Building Council, where it does open up the possibility that their membership base might want to contribute new equipment to some of our more deserving clients, customers in DCs.
Great. Anybody have any additional questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move into the follow-up on low-income programs in the district. And maybe since we now have present low-income representative, and since the People's Council was not herself here last week, would somebody be able to summarize their understanding of what how Jared characterized the issue? Or would you like to?
If you don't feel like it's unfair of me to try to characterize it, I would be happy to try to do so.
Okay.
Jared Lang, for those of you who don't know, has been working with National Housing Trust NHT, a low-income developer, owner of properties here in the District of Columbia, probably outside of the district as well, for a number of years. And we've been working with NHT in support of low-income programs, probably going back to 2012 or so, when we started significant work in the low-income space. And so when Jared made a presentation to the advisory board last month, he reflected upon and presented a number of different projects that we had supported with significantly more dollars than we are currently in this current iteration of the project or contract, than we are currently supporting other low-income projects and his as well. To be a little bit more granular about it, Jared presented 2 or 3 different projects. One was Channel Square over in Southwest. Another one was a house over in a multifamily building in Ward 1 that had been burned out, and there was substantial rehab there. We supported NHT. On both of those projects, we probably, our contribution to those projects probably exceeded $600,000, maybe almost $1 million on those projects individually, not collectively, but individually. And Jared was lamenting that under our current new contract, which has a different spending threshold for low-income spending and a new requirement that we achieve a certain level of savings within that spending, that we are not currently expending or investing $600,000, $700,000 per low-income project. And let me pause right there to make sure that that's a fair characterization.
If I can add, the previous contract, the FY11 contract, the low-income benchmark was just a spend goal. You didn't have to achieve a certain level of savings. You just had to spend on low-income programs. So the SU,
something like 30%.
Yeah, 30%. Right. So the SU wasn't penalized for funding 100% of the cost of a low-income project. Now it's not just a spend target, but it's also you have to achieve a certain level of savings to make sure that there's a certain yield you have to achieve. So now the SU is incentivized to not spend 100% on low-income projects, but instead get the developer or the property owner to contribute some funds, and thereby expand the number of projects that get funded by funding less than 100% for each, and thereby getting a higher yield for the number of SU dollars spent. And so what Jared was saying was that under this model, because the SU is penalized for spending 100% or anything close to that on a project, some of his projects were not getting funded.
And I guess
or not funded at the level that he had seen in prior years. I think that was.
Yeah.
And what I understood him to be saying was that the lower amount of funding was meaning that there was less innovation happening.
Well, the other change in the new contract to give the SU more flexibility, the 30% spend on low income of the budget that was in the FY11 contract was reduced to 20%.
Yes.
So that they have more flexibility in how to spend the money. But the 20% is a floor, it's not a ceiling. It's based on hitting the benchmark.
I think there's also,
Sorry.
this is Millie on the phone, I think that there was also some concern that the accounting of the greenhouse gas reductions were impacting the way we were willing to, the SEU was willing to invest in some of the projects. So the same sort of issue of, are we investing mostly in the lighting side and some of the low-hanging fruit rather than some of the larger upgrades?
Right. So one of the things he said was that they weren't able to do deep energy retrofits before, and prior to that, the projects were becoming more substantial and reaching a lot further. So that is correct, Millie. It's saying that with the new spend savings goal, it complicates how funds are being spent, and that deep energy retrofits were being done before and have now somewhat been abandoned.
Is it also viewed as a disincentive to the building owners because they now have to contribute some amount of money?
See, I think that if I'm honest, there's a lot of history to this. Yesterday we celebrated our 8th anniversary of the DCSE. We opened the doors years on one day, and we had, I did some reflection not only on the 8 years that we spent, but how our work in this market has evolved over those years. It has not been a stagnant marketplace. It has had to evolve. I think as Councilor Hussein pointed out, remember, if you wind the clock back to as recently as 2015, 2016, we were spending roughly 30% of our funds in the low-income space without a requirement that we get any amount of specific savings out of that. So what's 30% of 20 million? Let's do a little math here. I think it's important that we level set. So that's $6 million a year that we were spending in the low-income space. When the new contract kicked in about 2.5 years ago, that 30% requirement was reduced to 20%. That's not a 10% delta, or you might want to call it a 10% delta, but in real dollars, it's $2 million less that is invested in the low-income space. And then inserting a requirement that we achieve a certain amount of energy savings out of that investment. We took a look at what we were achieving in terms of, even though we didn't have, there was no goal around it. In the earlier days when we were spending 30%, we were getting roughly 8 to 12% of our savings out of that 30% spent. When the 20% threshold kicked in the new contract, you're now asking us to get basically the equivalent amount of savings with $2 million less invested in that space, or 10% less, however you want to define it, whichever math is more comfortable for you. I learned a new word when I started working on this contract, and I've uttered it in front of this board before many times. It's called orthogonal. And this is the classic case of orthogonal, meaning pulling and tugging.
How do you spell that?
Sometimes O-R-T-H-O-G-O-N-A-L, orthogonal. You know, it's not A, it's O-R-T-H-O-G-O-N-A-L. It is pulling and tugging somewhat at 90-degree angles. And this new benchmark, for me, epitomizes the term orthogonal. So what we were forced to do internally was to go back and say, if we're spending 2% less in this space, but you roughly get 10% less, 2 million less, but you've roughly got to get the same amount of energy savings out of it because now there's money at risk. We had to change the way we went about doing our business. In the old days, as I would say, if you wind the clock back to 2015, 2016, we had a lot of what we would call direct install projects, where we engaged with Jared Lang, or basically, and there weren't a lot of other low-income market players in this space at that time, where we engaged with them and we said, okay, we're going to hire this contractor. Some of those contractors used to sit around this table. We'd hire this contractor. They would go into the building. They would do $600,000-$700,000 worth of work in there, and we would do that. When we changed our programming, we went to something that we call the Income Qualified Efficiency Fund, which is a program that is designed to bring the contractors, the developers, and the SEU to the table with a cost share. Now, we've been paying 100% for a lot of the projects in the low-income space in the past. We knew we didn't have that enough money to do that moving forward. We would have never hit the low-income savings goal if we had been spending 100% on these projects. So now, contractors and the property owners come to us and say, okay, for a project at this building, property owner will put up 40% of the funds that are required to do the work. The DCSEU will put up 60%, or 50-50, or some sort of cost share that we bring to the table to stretch our dollars further, to look at projects that maximize savings, to enable us to hit this both spending threshold and this and the savings benchmark. And I should say, as time has evolved, as we've gone back over 8 years, in the earlier years, whereas we may have been working with 4 or 5 low-income developers, we got opportunities from 50 different organizations. I shouldn't say that many of them are the same organizations, but 50 different properties bid into this low-income energy efficiency, the new program that we're running now. There are a lot more market players out here in this space today than we're working with a lot more folks than we were 5, 8 years ago when we got started with this. And so we also had to take 2 steps backwards and say, why are we doing this work in the first place? What are the ultimate goals that we believe the city has set forward for us? And I'll give you 4. Developing and moving markets, contracting opportunities for local businesses here, CEOs, creating job opportunities for district residents here, which all culminate in the reduction of the energy burden on low-income residents. And I would offer to you that under the new goal that's been set forth, both lowering spending but increasing or setting a savings goal, we've not only been able to develop and move markets and create contracting opportunities, quite frankly, we're doing more of it in some instances than we were in the past. And so I think that, as I said, there are more people playing in this market. The market is evolving. And I think that, you know, we are now at the point, though, that and I don't want to take too much time. I know I'm going on a little bit, because the important news is really going to be presented to you by Mark Nielsen when he comes after me. So we've been at this, as I said, for about 8 years now, but you know, we can't fence time. We can't wind the clock back to the days when we were spending and investing $500,000, $600,000 per project. We have to look forward, quite frankly. As we sprung forward over the weekend, we've got to look forward now, I think, to where this market is going over the next couple or 3 or 4 years. What we know is this: we have a contract, you know, here with the Department of Energy and Environment, where, as I said, we're spending about $4 million a year. We know that this year, Washington Gas will be investing another $4.2 million in the low-income space as a result of its merger with AltaGas. We know that through the omnibus legislation that will become effective in less than a month, PEPCO and Washington Gas will start to offer programs, depending on how you read the legislation, and Mark will break this down for us in a minute, in the low-income space. So there will be significantly greater investment in this space moving forward than there has been, I would say, over the last 2.5 years. And so I'm not debating what Jared Lang said to any measure whatsoever. I mean, that's not what this is about. I don't think it's a debate. I think it's a recitation of facts and an understanding of where we're going in the not too distant future that really should be the conversation now, not quite frankly what happened, and what has happened. I mean, we are fulfilling, we are hitting the goals. As I've said to you, as I've said to the council when I testified there at the oversight hearing last month, I don't want to be back in this advisory board not having hit our low income savings benchmark next year. We've improved upon it year over year. This is the third year that we've had this benchmark. We hope to exceed the maximum on it like we did with all of the other benchmarks. But I really think the important discussion is about how we move forward in this low income space. As I said, one that is getting more crowded, where there would be more market players, and where I think the city has a stronger desire to see some really great results for our income qualified residents.
But I do think that I now understand Vicky's point of whether or not we need to actually look at the benchmark to see if that could be modified so that we could accomplish both goals, so that you are not spending more than you have to, but at the same time, we are increasing the potential savings.
And I think that, I guess it's prompting a few questions, which is whether the benchmarks were set in the wrong place. If you were spending 30% and achieving 8 to 12, or on average 10, and then the new benchmark became spend less and achieve the same, then maybe the savings target was the wrong savings target, or the reduction in spending was the wrong one, because that doesn't necessarily make sense to achieve the same.
I think what I heard is, and I know when I was on the board, the advocacy for a savings target for income. Sure. This is efficient for flow.
Yeah.
And so you do want to make sure that happens. I get that the market players can reduce and help lift the weight for low income customers increase as of April.
Well, the law will go into effect on April 4th, but and I should have added to that because this was slipped my mind. And pardon me. Thank you for reminding me, Bernice. The GCSU will receive additional funds in FY20, about to spend in this space. Other market players are able to offer programs and go before the commission. So we don't know exactly how much. But we know that there will be more money.
But when the other market players come in, they're not going to be under the SEU benchmarks.
Absolutely correct.
They'll be under for the regulated industry, they'll be under the regulatory commission.
Right, which I think was the question as to, how the programs are going to complement one another.
So that will be in the regulatory commission represented.
Mark will break this down in a minute.
But we don't know what those rules, regulations, and goals will be until they actually happen.
So, and I don't think that the issue, as I understood it, was that having a saving goal was a bad thing. I mean, I think, from years of government experience, you don't want to just go up to the hill and say, I spent your money. Somebody's going to say, you got to show me, what I got for that money. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to keep spending it. So that part I get. I think it was the question of whether or not the formulation was creating the right incentives. So I think at some point there was also a discussion about if there is a savings requirement, then does that disincentivize more spending? If the spending is not a ceiling, it's a floor. Was one thing that came in, sort of, because the savings in the low-income arena are harder to achieve than they may be in a commercial space. So I think there were some.
I think you need to add a layer to that, which is, remember, the overall savings that we have, and I have to achieve, and I'm not just talking about in the low-income space, but in the overall contract, have to be factored into those considerations as well.
So, and again, I'm not being critical. What I'm just saying is, given that was a big change, and that's a big part of what the SEU does, and it had been that it was absent other market participants, and now there will be more market participants, and that was a harder to reach area. So I think the question was just having heard from someone in the community who said we're getting fewer deep energy retrofits, or we seem to be seeing less innovation, and did we get it right, and is there any benefit to looking anew, or is the proper timing when, in the context of the PSC administration of the market participants now joining the same convention?
I would like to add one dynamic too here for the board's consideration. It's not simply the challenge between savings and spending in the low-income space. The benchmark of itself was expanded by legislation, where the DCSU can now spend on renewable energy, on shelters, on clinics, and other buildings serving low-income folks. So folks like the Jared Langs of the world, of course their pie would become smaller because they're not just limited to claiming savings from doing residential units. So that needs to be brought into the picture of how expanded this benchmark is and where some of the savings might be. For example, the DCSU can choose to do energy efficiency in one of the district shelters or one of the for-profits organizations serving low-income residents that might produce a much larger savings benefit than actually doing residential upgrades. So it's important that we consider all of the complexities involved with this benchmark and balancing the savings target with the spending requirements and how the DCSU needs to go about achieving those goals.
This is Nina, and I'd like to raise a question that's been referred to, but in a kind of bigger picture way, which is as low-hanging fruit of especially lighting is addressed, and the SCU overall needs to, well, first of all, maybe I should ask, does the SCU project that there's another 4 years of lighting to do that will satisfy many of its benchmarks? So that's one question. If that's not the case, if in fact it is considered low-hanging fruit that's close to have been achieved, I'd love to know what strategies SCU is developing overall, not just low income, in terms of the ratio of spending to the gains and efficiencies, lowering of carbon footprint. So it's the bigger question that really, to me, is in a way the important one, and it affects more than that one benchmark we've been discussing. Although that's a very great illustration of some of the questions. It raises some of the important questions, but I think the questions are there overall. So this is not the time on this agenda to discuss this, but is there what might you propose, what might we propose as a way to get at this in an agenda item that's not overbearing?
Madam Chair, might I suggest that let us take Ms. Dodge's question, back to the barn, and that be one of the things that we note in the minutes.
Sure.
As a question at our next meeting.
Sure. And I think on the question of this benchmark, so we heard from somebody who came in and said it's not what it used to be, and we hear okay, that going backwards isn't necessarily what we want to do either. So I don't know that the board has enough information to be making a recommendation at this point, one way or another. I think that just that there's been some percolation, and that's worthy of attention.
I didn't, whatever I just said in characterization of Jared's comments, please forgive me if I said that I disagreed with what he was saying. Yes, the benchmark has changed. The amount of money we're investing in this market segment has changed. The amount of money that will be invested in this market segment is growing dynamically. That's why I would hope that we don't run over the market some time to present, because I think this is a very, very important discussion.
Agreed. So I guess my recommendation was going to be that we hear from Mark and we keep our eye on what is going on with the new entrance into the discussion with PEPCO, Washington Gas coming in, and then we see what does the SEU have a new role? Is the second iteration of the benchmark not the right one either, because now the whole landscape has changed again. So,
I just want to make one point as brief,
please.
that I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the low-income community needs some level of protection. And in addition to, the public entities that are being funded, and I agree with that, the not single, but multifamily, single family as needed, they need protections, and we need to ensure that they receive that, particularly with the new legislation and the increase in funds and the increase in what they have to pay, not those that are necessarily protected and receiving, but that wedge in between. So that is a factor that when we have the open discussion, that needs to be considered.
So I guess my restatement or question is, does that mean that within the evolution of the benchmark that did start to include bus shelters or hospitals, that means if investments go in that direction, then they necessarily come out of the residential or the homeowner, and
That's an
whether
open
the
discussion.
balance
I think that requires further discussion. I don't have personally enough information now to make that determination, but I think it is a factor.
I can tell you wholeheartedly that the answer is yes, because we're operating with a fixed bottom line. So every dollar they spend on a shelter or a clinic is a dollar less available to go into a low-income single-family or multi-family unit.
There's also uncirculated chart that talks about so that we did a presentation a couple of weeks back where we were able to achieve maximum income savings. Let's say doing a single family application, that would take like $19 to do that. Minimum would take like $8. But we can show from a programming perspective some of that orthogonal dynamic savings. I mean, you have to make choices on the very best savings, and so I think Connor, if we show you those numbers again, that might be better discussion.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, Bernice.
Mark.
Yeah, let's hear from Mark.
Teresa, do you mind pulling up those slides, page 9?
Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Nielsen. I'm the legislative director here at DOE. And with the departure of our chief of staff, I'm currently serving as the intern. So we had a few weeks back kind of a briefing. I'm happy to send these slides out. Nina, I know you and the rest of the folks on the phone can't see these. I apologize. We will send these shortly after the meeting. So right now, the way the bill was structured is that some of the provisions would become effective once congressional review had happened, and that was just Title I. So right now, the projected effective date for that title is March 28th, and that's the portfolio standard. It's on the timing of RIDF funds, and we can go into a little bit of detail there. The rest of the titles are subject to funding and the district's budget. Right now, the budget team is finalizing some of the projections of the SCTF, and we're also making sure that the allowable uses of both REDF and SCTF match up with all of the different bill requirements and programs. So we're kind of working through that process now, but the thought is that the rest of these titles will be effective as of October 1st. And then do you mind going to page 2? Top. Right, sorry, page 3. This is all unplanned, I apologize, but I will send these out. These are kind of our cheat sheet for all the different. Sorry.
Go back down to. Oh wait, that's better.
And then page 4.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate you joining us on. So as I mentioned, yes?
Was this document mailed to those of us on the phone?
Would you like to send it?
Yeah, go ahead.
But
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
He said
sending
he'll send them around after.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, send it now, but if you would just kind of, I guess, pause on circulating it, but be on the SU board for now. Yeah.
It's okay. For me anyway, I can follow it carefully.
Okay, so as I mentioned, so these are all the provisions that are going to be effective as of March 28th. We've got all of the polio standard requirements, the RECs, and to the PJM. We've got the PSC requirements to kind of look at different types of RECs that are used for compliance with the Act. And then it changed the timing of the revenue the department receives, ECP payments, and expands the different missions of the PSC, Office of People's Counsel, to kind of review whether or not the district is compliance commitments. Okay, and then we could go to the next one. And this has kind of been the subject of the discussion today, is all the new energy efficiency programs. So a lot of this authority we expect will be effective as of October 1st. Of course, before a lot of these programs can be rolled out and approved by the PSC, there's going to be kind of a working group that is going to kind of establish what the different performance benchmarks and metrics are to evaluate whether or not those programs should be allowed. And my understanding is that's underway, even though the law will probably, it says right now that within 90 days of the effective date, we have to kind of populate that board. We're intending to move faster, so we're trying to get that on the books. And I think maybe the next meeting we have a better date. So yeah, let's see. Beyond energy efficiency, I don't want to take too much time, but I'll just kind of do the overview. So Title III, this is all the building energy performance standards and benchmarking amendments. So our team right now is also working to kind of figure out what the outline programs will be. Of course, it's required that there's going to be working groups, so we're looking into appointees there as well. Title IV, if you would. So the Sustainable Energy Infrastructure Capacity Building and Pipeline Program. So this is kind of a program that happened towards the end of Bill's life between first and second reading. This was going to make sure we got capacity and recipients here in the district, and kind of district businesses that do this type of work. And then Title V, so the transportation emission requirements. So these are all the things related to transportation that will impact a lot of GDOT's planning. And DMV is also required to have some, I think, revised regs based on efficiency vehicles. So one thing we're working on right now in the the budget process is making sure that those, I think, initial contracts for contractors to develop those programs for those agencies are funded. So that's kind of the broad overview of where we are with this right now. Are there any questions? I'll do my best to answer that. If not, I'll follow up with you.
Do you mind just quickly going back to the Title II and the discussion we were just having on how we envision the interaction of the utilities and the SEU and energy efficiency programs in low-income space?
Right, and so my understanding, kind of based on discussions with council staff, is that the way it's not exactly clear, but because the PSU is required to evaluate all energy efficiency programs based on certain metrics established by the working group, the thought is that's the thing that needs to happen first. These working groups, as they work with the PSC, need to establish these clear standards. And then after that, then both any of the utilities can propose those programs.
Okay, so it's a newly formed working group.
It's a newly formed
That's what's been governing are there currently not utility administered energy efficiency programs? I'm thinking of other states.
Demand response.
Yeah. And the metrics come out of what?
And the PSC will determine who's working.
No, it's
No, the
specified in
bill
the
actually
act.
specifies a couple of key groups, which does include this advisory board, and we may want to talk about how the board will involve in our working group, whether you select a few members or you send the entire group to participate in the working group.
And then how often is the working group going to meet?
Well, the PSC, I think, will dictate the schedule for the meetings, but the first will be the formulation of the working group, which, of course, will include the board, DOE, the SCU, People's Council's Office, and a couple other stakeholders.
Well, I would encourage board members to think about their interest in it, and maybe you all can assist us in giving us a heads up when that starts to get formulated.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's for maybe somebody getting that to working group.
All right, I think that's kind of, I guess, the big update for Clean Energy DC. The other thing I wanted to is the Green Bank board nominations. So 4 have been announced, 3 more, and we're hoping to get those through confirmation here in the next month, probably April, and then after that, hopefully have them confirmed to the first legislative. And as you know, there will be a lot of coordination between the Green Bank and the city, correct? So this is an important partnership to understand who all those players are. All right.
Mayor appoints those.
Yes, Mayor appoints them and by council. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So, anybody? Okay, other matters. Got any? Anyone?
What's the date of the next meeting? Is it?
The second Tuesday of April, which is yes, the second Tuesday.
Okay. I'm not aware. Did we end up with anything concrete on the agenda for next meeting?
Well, we did agree that Nina asked a question and we would take that up at the next.
Is that the next meeting? Okay.
It's April 9th.
Okay.
Refresh my recollection. What was Nina's question?
Ms. Dodge, would you like to restate your question?
Well, maybe you should. The question, the request was to hear from the SCU how the strategy they're developing to develop for programs once the low-hanging fruit of lighting and so on expires, is reduced. That's not very eloquent, but
We'll have an elegant response.
Big bang. Yeah.
Well, that does remind me that there have been some of the longer-term kinds of issues that were brought up in the board's report, and I'm wondering if those would be good to link up as well, like when we started to talk about extracting out some more meaningful ways potentially of tracking achievement of public health, or what we were calling, I think, secondary benefits.
If you like, we can put a presentation from the M&V consultant on the agenda for next meeting, more like what I would call a EM&V 101. We can tease out some of these things that the board would like to start tracking as
Sure.
performance metrics.
And I think that we were going to talk to the EM&V folk about potentially modernizing or looking again. And I think Sean Scully was going to help with on some what are new EM&V methods or mechanisms that may or may not be being employed here. So maybe we ought to try and get that on the next agenda.
Yeah, I get
it. Sounds like a good complement to what we were talking about, sort of forward-looking, now that we're halfway through the
I'll ask him to come in and give the board a presentation.
Thank you. Anybody got anything else? Okay.
And I,
Go ahead.
Vicki,
Yep.
there was one request I put in also earlier on that I want to make sure is minuted, which is that we have an ongoing tracking of the amount of solar for all time in our SDU staff time expenditures, just so we see what that involves.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
7 minutes early. Yeah.
Family.
Yeah.
My daughter's starting kindergarten next year.
Oh my. Oh, you where are you looking?
We've narrowed it